We know that there's disparity in the incarceration rates by race. It's commonly referred to as disproportionate minority confinement, or DMC. As far as a general rate of incarceration, that rate is 748 prisoners per 100,000 citizens. At least that's what Newman cites. However, we know that Latinos and African Americans are 60% of prison population, though only 27% of the general population. We know that black males are incarcerated at 2.6 times the rate of Latino offenders, and that black males are also incarcerated at 7 times the rate of whites. And we see the same kind of imbalance for youth of color or juvenile offenders. We see tremendous imbalances in education when it's considered in light of incarceration. Dropping out of school appears to be a high-risk factor that correlates with incarceration. About 60% of black high school dropouts born between 1965 and 1969 have served time by early 30s. And the laws regarding the war on drugs has worsened racial disparities in incarceration. The laws on crack cocaine, which is less expensive to use, are much harsher than the laws involving regular cocaine, even though studies show that the effects of the two drugs are very similar. I want to point out another interesting issue about arrests in the poor, and that is an ACLU, and that's the American Civil Liberties Union, who is probably the single most influential protection organization for general civil liberties. They're finding on jail time, and that is, in at least 16 states, poor people spend time in jail for minor offenses such as speeding and loitering. The problem is that the poor cannot afford to pay their fines, and if the judge imposes a fine and you cannot pay it, then the judge may issue an arrest warrant for contempt of court for failure to pay. So let's just say I get cited for loitering, and that means I'm hanging around an area where I don't really have any good reason to be around, and the fine is $500. If I can pay, great, all is good. But if I get ordered to pay and don't have the funds, I get cited with contempt, and I get to go to jail on that contempt charge. In Kentucky, civil contempt can be up to a 6-month jail term. We know, too, that a disproportionate number of people on death row are black or Latino. Recall that we talked earlier this semester about how in 1986 the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that race-based peremptory challenges were unconstitutional, but the reality is they still occur. One Philadelphia study established that when black jurors are sitting on the jury, the death sentence is less likely to be imposed. There is at least a little bit of movement towards positive change. In 1998, Kentucky was the first state to pass a Racial Justice Act, which allows defendants to use statistical evidence to show racial bias regarding the imposition of the death sentence. But there can be terrible disparity on the imposition of the death penalty, and in 2001, Illinois imposed a moratorium on executions. Too many on death row were later proven innocent. In 2002, Maryland followed with a moratorium on executions. In 2011, Illinois abolished the death penalty and commuted the sentence of all the inmates on death row.